Everything is bigger in Texas, and the Texas A&M University system is no exception. With 11 universities and 8 state agencies, the people of Texas A&M are serving more Texans and making a bigger difference than ever before. These are the educators, researchers, emergency responders, and public servants of the Texas A&M University system. Learn how their work is impacting both Texas and the world. Welcome to Around Texas with Chancellor John Sharp.
2022 was the most active and destructive year for Texas wildfires in over a decade. 12,400 wildfires burned from January to December, charring over 650,000 acres of land. Drought conditions and weather phenomena combined to create a recipe for destruction that should have been unprecedented. And the only reason it wasn't is because of the work happening right now at the Texas A&M Forest Service. In this special episode of Around Texas, we'll go behind the scenes to show how our state approaches wildfire suppression and how, with the help of our partners and volunteer firefighters, the Texas A&M Forest Service was able to save over 8,000 homes and livelihoods in just this past year alone.
Wildfires in Texas can be catastrophic. They burn so hot that sometimes water will evaporate before it even hits the ground. And based on data from the past 20 years, these wildfires are only getting worse.
Wildfires are getting bigger and badder. We're seeing more wildfires, and I think this year it's been the most onerous since 2011.
And there are a lot of factors contributing to this, including a lack of land management and a lack of fire in the landscape, which is actually a natural and necessary element of the Texas ecosystem. But climate change and the increasing occurrence of droughts and severe weather are significantly stretching the Texas wildfire season.
In Texas, we've got conditions that are conducive to wildfire almost year-round. You know, even when it's cool outside, we see dry frontal passages through the state. That low humidity, that elevated wind really drive a fire a lot across the landscape.
In fact, some of the worst Texas wildfires on record have happened in the winter. Dormant grasses, dry conditions, and strong winds fuel a phenomena called the Southern Plains wildfire outbreak. And as more Texans convert land into recreational space, a lack of grazing and land management makes for a complicated environment to reduce frequency and intensity of those wildfires.
We're seeing changes in Texas, and not only population increase, they are building out into what we've considered wildland fuels up to this point, but we also see a change in land use. More fuels being grown, more grasses, more brush being grown up on that same footprint, used to be agriculture. And so we're seeing fires that are actually impacting Texans more and more often.
One key point here when we talk about the maintenance of land, Texas is the most forested state among the contiguous 48 states. Now, something that also makes us stand out, that is Texas, is that 95% of the land is privately owned. And so what that means for us is we have to really reach out to them to educate them and to consistently give them technical assistance. We call it fuels reductions and things of that nature. That mitigates the occurrence of wildfires. So the more you do of one, the less you have of the other.
I've always enjoyed working outside, whether it was something weed eating, mowing, or whatever. I've always enjoyed that kind of work. Some people, I guess, don't enjoy doing what they do for work, coming home and doing it, but luckily I do. Take care of your land, and the land will give back to you. And it's Kelly's family land and a house we've built together, and having the kid and building a family. Anything we can do to keep that from being in jeopardy of any sort, whether it's from fire or anything else, it's definitely important to us. Didn't really plan it that way, to go be a wildland firefighter and be on the crew to do that. But once I kind of figured that out in my life, luckily I was pretty young, it just kind of made sense. Austin's getting everybody gaggled up. My primary responsibility is to coordinate the Lone Star State hand crew. So when we're putting a crew together, we're either going to pre-position for possible fires, or we're going to do a project, or we're going to a fire. So most of the time, even if we're going to prepo for fire, we'll work on project work while we're out. And so that's fuels mitigation work, whether it's on our observatory project that we've been working on, or working with the National Park Service and just doing any kind of fuels mitigation around their buildings, cabins. And then, of course, if a fire pops in the area and they need a crew, they call us and we go out there and we put in hand line or burn or anything that's needed on the fire.
The best way to prevent a wildfire or a catastrophic wildfire is to stop it before it ever starts, to prevent its ignition, or at least modify the landscape so if ignition does occur, it has a reduced chance of growing into a big wildfire. And mitigation is one way that we do that.
Mitigation comes in many forms, but the primary goal is to reduce the amount of vegetation that can easily fuel a fire. For instance, prescribed burning or mulching the understory of a forest can reduce combustible brush and prevent fires from climbing into the tree canopy. Limbing up trees ensures that grass fires can pass underneath as well. But mitigation also takes simple forms, like keeping grass cut short or splitting up plots of land by inserting fuel breaks or fire lines. And that form of mitigation is work that Texas A&M Forest Service does every day.
When things don't happen, okay, then you just think, well, because that's a natural occurrence. And what they don't see is all of the work that goes on behind the scenes that the Texas A&M Forest Service does that helps to mitigate and reduce the occurrence of wildfires. And I'm talking about, again, what we do to educate landowners, what we do to do fuels reduction ourselves, to include prescribed burns. All those things are needed so we can reduce the occurrence and mitigate, okay, fires from becoming bigger and badder.
We've also got a very strong capacity building department in the agency, and this department's focus is building the capability of local responders. Because when you look across the state, those 1,800 fire departments, that really is our front line, our first line of defense when it comes to wildfire.
To reinforce that front line, Texas A&M Forest Service employs over 300 qualified wildland firefighters. These men and women train in everything, from chainsaw handling and bulldozer operation to conservation education and leadership roles, all of which are skills that can be applied toward mitigation.
I truly believe that there's an inextricable linkage between the conservation activities and the protection activities. The more you do to prevent wildfires, then the less catastrophic those fires will become, and the more likely we'll be able to save homes and, more importantly, lives.
So we met a handful of years back working in the Forest Service. Kelly, she was part of the crew back in the day, and then so we built the house, and now we've got a boy. But yeah, it can definitely help. Your significant other being experienced with wildland fire and in this world, especially in the same agency, she knows a lot of stuff that's going on, and probably makes it easier for her to know where I'm at and what I'm doing, if something crazy happens. So on a fire, when you're on a crew, the crew does the same thing that a bulldozer will do for the most part. It'll just be a hand line instead of a dozer line, and it's, in rougher country where maybe a bulldozer can't get to, we'll take hand tools and chainsaws and we'll go to, stop that fire spread.
Bulldozers, motor graders, heavy mechanized equipment like that, their primary mission is to remove that fuel from the advancing fire, because once that fuel's gone, once it's down to bare mineral soil, the fire has nothing else to consume, and our goal is to suppress the wildfire.
However, bulldozers are huge and heavy machines. And there are some regions of Texas they simply can't navigate. In that kind of steep and rocky terrain, firefighters are forced to hike into that fire and dig out a fire break with nothing more than hand tools.
Fires in the state of Texas can traverse the landscape very, very quickly, oftentimes faster than a human can run. So hand crews operate in a very dynamic and dangerous environment. And so they always take safety actions and implement protocols to make sure they're doing the fire suppression as safely as possible.
Dan? Man, you never know where you're going or what you're gonna do. Like, I dabble in some project work, but possibility of having a fire, we always carry whatever tools we would need to accomplish what a crew works on. Drip torches, hand tools, and chainsaws, and fuel and food for everybody, and I don't know, you're just ready for anything.
Because wildfires can spread so quickly and often overwhelm volunteer fire departments in the first hour of ignition, a key element to wildfire suppression is predicting when and where wildfires will occur. This allows Texas A&M Forest Service to stage equipment and personnel nearby and bring in out-of-state resources if locals are stretched thin.
There will be wildfires. It's not if, it's where and when. And to determine the where and when, we use something we call predictive analysis. We have cooperators, the National Weather Service. We have a staff here that actually looks at weather, drought, and what have you, and they predict where fires are going to occur. So we put those resources there to make sure we can quickly get there to save, first of all, lives, homes, and the environment.
This Department of Predictive Services operates out of over 60 offices statewide, and they are constantly monitoring everything from weather forecasts to fuel types and quantities, like how much mesquite brush has grown up or the amount of pine needle buildup. They'll even measure the level of moisture in those fuels to determine how a wildfire might behave once it sparks.
When certain conditions exist where we know a wildfire is probable, we will pre-position or place the hand crew where terrain doesn't allow mechanized equipment. So if a wildfire does occur, it can be less impactful and a lot easier to suppress.
All right, so spot weather for today on the Whitworth fire.
We had a 10-person module staffing in Fort Davis, Texas. We'd been there a couple of days, and then they had a fire just outside of Junction. You can literally see it from the town, basically. Really steep, kind of rocky, real cruddy terrain, not really dozer country or anything like that. So Teddy Heckman, the IC4 trainee, got on scene, saw it, and immediately ordered the crew. So we were able to get in Junction, bed down, and then hit it first thing in the morning.
The incident commander had already staged bulldozers at the base of the mountains to carve a containment line. Dustin and his crew were to cut a line through the mountains and tie into that dozer line. This required chainsaws to cut trees, branches, and brush, while hand tools followed, digging up grass and debris. The only problem was the terrain.
So in the state of Texas, the Texas A&M Forest Service is the lead state agency when it comes to wildfire suppression. And we do that through using a tiered approach. So in the state of Texas, local responders, local fire departments are typically the first to arrive on a wildfire scene. And 9 out of 10 times, they're highly successful at suppressing and containing that wildfire. 10% of the time, the wildfire exceeds their capacity, and that's when the Texas A&M Forest Service comes in. We operate in a unified command scenario where we are working hand in glove with those departments to suppress the wildfire. Mutual aid or assistance to fire departments typically comes in the form of bulldozers, motor graders, maybe some additional fire engines, and a lot of times aircraft where we bring tankers in to drop water and retardant. And that allows bolstering of local resources that they may not have access to.
Since wildfires happen all across the state of Texas, and often simultaneously, The question of who goes where and how the state's resources are applied can be a difficult and high-stakes balancing act. This is where leadership and technology comes into play. While operating out of the Emergency Operations Center, Texas A&M Forest Service can address dozens of wildfires happening all across the state.
I think to the average citizen, there's a lot of misconceptions on how we contain or stop wildfires. Well, at the end of the day, you just don't stop them, okay? I mean, unless you have just some dramatic rains or something of that nature, sometimes you just have to let them burn out also. There are a number of strategies and options and alternatives to containing or controlling a wildfire. And then it's not an exact science where you think you've put a fire out here, but then the wind comes up and you have some embers that are burning. And those embers can jump those lines, then that starts another wildfire in another section of land.
Once Texas A&M Forest Service is on the scene, wildfire suppression rarely looks like the kind of direct attack that you'll see at a structure fire. Instead, wildland firefighters begin by trying to contain the fire with fire breaks.
So on the wildland fire scene, we've got multiple tools that we utilize, bulldozers being one of our primary tools to separate that vegetation from the oncoming fire front. And they are very effective at what we call initial attack, or going really close to that fire line. We support those operations with fire engines. Those engines will come in with their water and spray hot spots to kind of quelch any additional heat that's on the fire scene. Air tankers, aerial suppression aircraft, they're dropping water or retardant, and the goal of that is really to slow the progression of the fire. And so we do utilize tankers heavily in the state of Texas, putting retardant and putting water on fires or adjacent to fires, but there is just simply not enough aircraft to put a wildfire out solely by utilizing them and the water and retardant they can supply.
Once fire breaks are in place, Texas A&M Forest Service can reinforce those breaks with water, additional bulldozers, or burnout operations, so that when the fire arrives, there's less chance of a spark jumping over the line and outflanking the first responders.
Fire moves fast. So if there's a fire that pops up, we have those folks on the ground there, walking the ground, and certainly they are the first ones in harm's way.
So we train day in and day out on how to suppress that wildfire safely. We take that into account as we build fire line, as we create safety zones, so that our folks can, if that fire does begin to outstrip what their pace is, they can retreat to an area that they are safe. You know, in a very worst case scenario, wildland firefighters do carry a fire shelter with them. It's on every wildland firefighter's pack, and this is deployed in the worst case scenario. We hope to never have to deploy one. We actually train so that we don't have to take refuge in that shelter.
While these fire shelters have saved countless lives and are a great last resort, they aren't 100% effective. Firefighters can still die of radiant heat if it gets too hot inside of the shelter. This makes the hand crew one of the most dangerous and high-risk roles in the Forest Service.
So we were on the Whitworth fire for 4 days total. Of course, the first day was a little rough. Still had some smoldering fire, just lots of smoke still prevalent, and slash like that, you know, it's gonna be a lot of work. The crew was doing good, putting in good line. I was scouting out some more extra escape routes and safety zones, stuff like that, as the crew was working, and I'd bump back and help them dig or move brush as necessary. Midday, it got hot. The fire was becoming more active and burning in green fuels that hadn't burnt before, and that created a lot of ember wash, or embers that'll fly through the air, and that's what causes spots on a lot of your wildfires. So had a lot of that dump over our hand line. We had worked that whole morning on, and just had multiple little spot fires all at once, and kind of just lost our line, and you know, in a matter of a couple minutes, really.
As the fire jumped their line, Dustin and his crew ran up the ridge to avoid being outflanked. Fortunately, they were backed up to the Llano River, and they had a remote airbase nearby with a helicopter on standby. So with the help of air support dropping thousands of gallons of water, the Lone Star hand crew was able to retreat to safety.
It's never fun to put in a good full day's work. You know, we probably hit that line for 5-6 hours or so. You're already whooped because of the heat, and then whatever you do get in doesn't even hold, it just kind of walks over it. Never a good feeling, for sure, but it's one of those things, you can't dwell on it too long, got to get the crew kind of in a safe spot, put our heads together and re-engage. So that's what we did. And then as the day progressed, that afternoon we got in there, and with all the water, the helicopter was put on the ground and really cold trail and mop up that black edge.
The hand crew began cutting a new line to fully encircle the fire. But because these hot and dry conditions were persisting across the state, the Whitworth fire was just one of multiple ongoing fires that month, all of which required their own crews and their own resources to contain.
When we're talking about wildfire response in this state, it takes a team. When boots of our wildland firefighters hit the ground, they're working in concert, not only with our internal team, but with the local responders, the local fire departments.
Bottom line is we can't be everywhere. That's why we work very closely with them. We also train with them and even with our TIFMAS partners, so we can't do it all ourselves. And that's very, very important in fighting fires.
Mike and Mitch, you guys have now been pre-identified to go fetch the trucks.
With the fire in check, Dustin and his crew made steady progress carving the new hand line. But as the day progressed, temperatures began to rise, holding and sustaining 108 degrees Fahrenheit.
When it gets hot like that, even the little smallest bit of work can really take a toll. Even when you took a break, you weren't catching a good break in 10 minutes and getting back to work. You had to really sit down, take a breather, try to find shade, drink plenty of water, and really, really watch your guys. So it makes for a long afternoon.
It took 2 full days to dig their line around the fire, and another 2 of mopping up. But after multiple 16-hour days in 100-degree heat, Dustin and the Lone Star State hand crew were able to contain the fire.
You know, on a large project for a multiple day fire like that one, once you do get it contained, extremely satisfying. So you've put something that is extremely dangerous to the public, extremely dangerous to the ecosystems of the state. You've put it back in a box and you've contained it. And the goal is, once you've got it in that box, keep it in that box. And so we don't leave the scene once the fire is contained or controlled. We'll continue to oversee that fire until we're certain that it is not going to escape containment.
It is not as easy as one would think, and so that capacity building program is very, very important because they are our partners, okay? So the more we help to build them up with capacity and help them to fill their ranks, then hopefully that is less reliance on us in the perfect world.
So yeah, it always feels good to get a fire wrapped up, especially one like that you lost. You get it wrapped up a couple days, get all your stuff put back together, and then you get another phone call and you're off to the next one. You're out there for 2 weeks. You get one wrapped, you got to go to the next one a lot of times. Nobody comes to work for a Forest Service to be rich. I could always probably go do something else and make more money, or whatever, but I enjoy my job, so I don't plan on going anywhere.
When we look at the hand crew, typically it's comprised of people that want to be a part of that suppression action, want to be good stewards, and so they're willing to work long hours, day after day, even long nights. And that's 14 or 21 days that individual is away from their home, away from their family, their significant other, their children. But that's a commitment they're willing to do to protect Texans. They're willing to go out to these remote areas, perform dangerous jobs, be away from family to do what they want to do to protect Texas.
It's always good that in that 2 weeks day 12, 13, 14, you really start looking forward to going home, see the kid and the family and stuff like that. And you get home and take a break and get ready for the next one.
I believe it takes an extended community to prevent and mitigate and control wildfires. It's not just upon the Texas A&M Forest Service. We're 300 people. It's not just upon the VFDs and the locals, all right? But it's on the individuals, every individual being vigilant. And you know, I would ask that when you see those folk who wear that Texas A&M Forest Service patch, or the VFD, or the locals, thank them for what they do, because it's those folks who are putting their lives on the line, away from their families, preventing wildfires.
That's all for this special episode on the Texas A&M Forest Service, and we'll see you next time on Around Texas.